Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Thursday, November 6th meeting of the Finance, Assessment, and Taxation Committee to discuss the proposed budget. Walking through our agenda for this evening that we outlaid yesterday evening during our meeting, we are here to discuss big changes to budget and or additions to budget since we are now past departmental updates. The agenda for this evening includes local law D, the curbside collection fee, a walk-on request for a fire department communications staff, walk-on request for city clerk additions, walk-on request for Commission of Disability budget. And committee members present this evening are Councilmember Keegan, Councilmember Ballerin, Councilmember Farrell, Councilmember Adams, and myself. We're also joined by other council members, Councilmember Conti, Councilmember Flynn. From our city, we have our city clerk, Shaniqua Jackson. We have our legislative director, Brian Jimenez. And we have our legislative aide, Carly Johnson. We also have our research counsel, Robert Wenner. So with that, first, going into Local Law D, reading this officially, Local Law D of 2025, it's a local law amending the curbside waste collection fee. In summary, just gonna close that. In summary, this local law, as part of the proposed budget, would double the trash collection fee per unit. For a single family, it would go from 90 to 180, for example. And thereon and thereforth, the more units that you have. We have had some discussion on this to date. We've had presentation on this from both our budget director as well as the Department of General Services. You all recall the chart that we've seen a few times as well. Essentially, the city's position on this is that, and the law itself states that the cost of curbside collection should offset the expenditure of curbside collection. And what has been proven to us in prior years up until now, we have been running in a deficit situation where expenditures exceed revenue. And so therefore, the doubling of this fee offsets that deficit position that we have been in historically. We have also had discussion on just the historical measure of this and why haven't we increased in the past. The reality is that probably we should, as a city, have increased in prior years to make sure that we're abiding by the local law. But unfortunately, we have not, and therefore we need to right-size and get back to the spirit of the law that we have. That has expressed some concerns when we look holistically at increases to our residents, affordability, and burden. Doubling a trash fee in 1 year is obviously a good, decent amount of money, going from 90 to 180 for a single unit household. In addition, we also have a 3% property tax also imposed as part of this budget. So with that, just want to get into conversation. Net new information that you have been provided. You now have a trash fee scaling table provided by our budget director. What this shows you is a scale here, 180 being the bottom, the additional revenue being proposed for the 180, or total revenue that is 4.8 million. Under the prior fee of 90, which is the top line, we would have received 2.4 million. So we're talking about a $2.4 million change to revenue with this increase. Then you can see the scale from there. If we were to reduce that by $10, which would equate to $10 less per year, which is roughly 80 cents per month, we would need to find and cut $266,667 in expenditures in this budget. If we were to take a little bit more of an aggressive approach, some things that have been previously discussed, for example, was doing half now and half later. Half of that would approximately be 130. If we were to do that, which would be $50 less per year to residents in impact compared to what is proposed, we would need to find $1,333,333 to cut in this budget. So this provides a depiction of what would need to happen if we were looking to decrease at various levels. I'd like to open it up to committee members first for comments. Councilmember Farrell.
Apologies that I was not here last night. I'm fighting a bug. I've said this, I personally, I'm very concerned about the increase in costs for our constituents, the residents of Albany, and I do absolutely think that we should be looking to find relief for them, but I strongly think that it should come looking at the tax levy and not the trash fee. And the reason for that is because our trash fee will be going up. It is going to exponentially increase. And this is something where it's right-sizing it. We're going to have to be doing this at some point anyway. We should have done it. And it's also going to a very specific thing. When we look at the broader budget, there's a lot of concerns about different things that are in the budget. I think that looking at the tax levy, that's something that is an overall statement more on the budget versus a fee that if you want garbage collection, it's got to be there. So that is my personal stance. I think if we're going to lower one of them, we should be lowering the tax levy and not the trash fee.
Thank you, Councilmember Farrell. Other committee members? Councilmember Adams.
For me, my question just revolves around getting more clarifications. Again, I wasn't here as well, but last night, but just wanted to get more clarification on what has been presented in that presentation or conversation yesterday to figure out what options we have on the table. You just went over a few, but was there more discussion behind that to have more information? Or so, yep. Even for Councilmember Farrell's point in terms of the tax levy, if there's more detail to that to kind of get a better understanding?
Yeah, so last night's discussion was focused around the tax levy. And then we obviously, because of the combination of both being impactful to residents, we did dabble into the trash fee, although that's the official topic for tonight. So what, we need to look holistically at impact if we're looking at affordability, if we're looking at trying to make cuts as a council, where do we do this appropriately? The information provided last night was around, generally speaking, if we were to reduce either the property tax levy, property tax rate increase or the trash fee increase, that we need to cut in the budget, and generally speaking we have to cut expenditures throughout the budget. Due to the amount that we need to cut, we are talking really about, in even conversations with the budget director, what functions are we willing to cut, because this is not like a $50,000, take $5,000 here, take $2,000 here situation. These are much larger numbers. As part of that conversation, we asked for this attachment that you all have that was provided today by our budget director, also as part of conversation. This shows you the property tax increase and the change that would occur. So if you look at I'm just going to put out there, $300,000 households, a property tax change to that for the year would be approximately $61 increase based on the 3% raise that's proposed in the budget. If we were to, what else do we have here? Oh, okay. If we were to reduce the levy, you can see here going down, where is this table? Okay, so if you compare the 2026 tax 3%, just follow with me for 100,000. I think that's probably the easier thing because it's the first row. The tax for a $100,000 home for 2026, as proposed at the 3%, is $751. That's at a 3% levy. If we were to reduce down to a 2% levy, that is $744. So the net change to that 1% reduction on a $100,000 household is $7 that they're saving for the year. If we drop down to 1%, same situation, $100,000, it would be $736 taxed. So that net change compared to the 3% would be $15. So that gives a sense of, you know, if we do look at tax decreases, what the impact to residents, how that would change. And that goes from 100,000 to 1 million, as you see. You can see the scale and compare forward. Just as had some conversation with our budget director today, he did share that if we were to reduce the tax by each percentage point, we need to cut approximately $630,000 in the budget. So if we go down to 2%, we have to find $630,000 in expenses to reduce. And then you see the impact that it would have in reduction to homeowners. Is that helpful? That was the conversation of yesterday, plus the additional information we received between yesterday and today. When we talk about these two, obviously, we also want to look holistically. So, Councilmember Keegan.
I also want to put out there, while I would prefer to deal with the property tax side, because in my opinion, if we were to reduce local law D or vote it down, because that revenue is attached to DGS, those cuts really would be to sanitation. So you're looking at a reduction in services. I also have concerns about even touching the tax rate because, as we discussed earlier, there is a very strong likelihood that we're going to have revenue shortfalls, and those revenue shortfalls are, you know, if we're cutting revenue on the budget side, it puts us in an even more precarious situation in terms of being able to do things like make payroll as we go down the line in 2026. However, I am much more willing to compromise on the overall tax levy than I would be on local law D. I think the other piece to all of this is that while it brings us revenue neutral for sanitation in terms of excuse me, curbside collection, that's not accounting for the impact that the resolution to the contract dispute that AFSCME currently has with the city. So in reality, you know, that department or that contract is going to increase roughly wages by $2 million if it settles this year. That's not accounted for in the budget, that I don't know how we're going to be able to pay. So, you know, I have concerns either way, but I think the better avenue is to address the actual cuts to expenditures in the budget across departments rather than shoot down legislation that is going to directly impact one specific department in one specific area.
Thank you, Councilmember Keegan. Councilmember Ballerin.
Thank you, Chair. So like I said yesterday, my main concern with the trash fee is that it's being doubled. And even if we would have gone up for the last 8 years at 3%, it would have only brought us to 120,000. So yes, our expenses are going up more than the inflation rate. So we need to cut budget overall. And when I see the trash fee, I don't see it as a DGS line item. Maybe that's how it's designed in the budget book, but I see it as an overall city budget line. I see it all as going into, this is all the money we have coming in, and this is all the money we have going out. So I would disagree with the idea that if we cut one specific line item, then that should be affecting that one specific department. I think it should be affecting the entire city as a whole. With that said, I am more than willing to work with this body and whoever's willing to work on whether it's the tax levy or the trash fee to find relief for our residents. I'm open to that. Look, I would have been happy with a trash fee reduction of $30. which would have brought us to 150, which would have brought us having to find 100, having to find $800,000. It wouldn't have been half, it wouldn't have been the 120, which is where we should be right now, with the 3% increase for the last 8 years, but at least it wouldn't be a doubling of the fee. So I don't think we're very far away from the 800,000 or 660,000. I think those are very doable numbers. I don't think they're, I don't think they're painless. I do think they're gonna come with some cuts that we're gonna have to look at. I mean, I've got some ideas. I'm sure everybody else has their own ideas. None of my ideas are pleasant. And none of my ideas feel good. So so I'm open to hear what other people's ideas are. Also, I was hoping our budget director would be here today. I don't know, I'm not sure if he had other plans, because I know he was here with us yesterday. But I think we need to have that open back and forth with the administration of what other ideas do they have and what other information do they have. Something I wanted to ask was, how's our fund balance? How's our revenue reserves? I'm sorry, our debt reserves. Where are we on those safety lines? To get a better idea of where we are overall, the health of our fiscal situation. Well, look, we're here, and I look forward to the conversation.
In response to your comments, Councilmember Ballard and I had a conversation with our budget director today. Unfortunately, he could not make it this evening, as previously discussed, but he did try to provide as much as I requested to him. As part of that conversation, I did ask about fund balance, and that is one of the things that he is working on getting, and we should be able to receive that by tomorrow. An interpretation of our fund balance overall, where we are, if there's any wiggle room in there, not ideal, but we're talking large numbers. And in also response to you, I disagree. I think 800K versus 630K, net difference of 170K to cut in this budget is a difference. And it is going to be, challenging in both situations, but I would rather try to find and work with the administration for 630 than 800K. Councilmember Bellerin.
Thank you, Shirley. I will say I am very appreciative of the information that he shared with us. I looked through it during my lunch this afternoon, and I was like, this is some great information, and I'm glad we have it, and I'm glad he took the time, because I know that took a lot of time for him and his team to put together, so I'm very appreciative of that. And I also know that he wasn't originally planning to be here today. He was here with us yesterday, so it's not a knock on him. It's just, I'm glad we have what we have. I just always like having these conversations back and forth when we can. I guess I want to make sure clear my point between the 800,000 and the 630 is we're a lot closer than maybe we think we are in trying to find a compromise. And I do think we can get there.
Thank you. Councilmember Conti.
Yeah, I'm going to put aside the trash reduction fee decrease or possibility of a decrease or whatever, and on that, but on the focus of which I've expressed before, is the incentives for waste reduction. Trash fee doesn't really provide any incentives for waste reduction. It doesn't make a differential between various households in terms of the amount of waste generated. So there's no incentive there. And while the DGS has their recycling and waste reduction programs, their public relations programs, there are no incentives built into it. I don't know that we can probably can't build something into this budget with a savings, but I think it's important to really emphasize that, even if it's just in the, I suppose, the memo that's done. If there can be some language in that regard, and I'd be happy to craft something for consideration that looks more at that issue. I mean, encouraging composting. We have people right now that actually pay $15 a month to have their compost taken away. which is the equivalent of what they're paying also for the trash fee, current trash fee. And so, they're doing that because it's the right things to do. If we created some incentives, could we increase that? I think we really need to look at the, bulk goods that are put curbside. I think Schenectady has moved, or actually, at least their council is proposing to do some fees on that, et cetera, which might generate revenue also, as well as helping with the landfill. But waste reduction is important because that also hopefully could reduce the costs that we're going to face coming up. So I think strong emphasis on waste reduction incentives is really important.
Absolutely, Councilmember Conti, and I agree that emphasizing this in our budget intent memo is important. Appreciate your comments there and your willingness to help out there, but we'll have that as a section. Councilmember Flynn, anything from your perspective?
Well, I'm against it. I think the decrease is too much right now, and I was against the original legislation on curbside. So I just hope your committee can find the money. I don't want to get too much in depth in my view on a lot of the jobs that are created, but I think we could find a way to not increase it.
And so can I ask you a question on that? So from your perspective, if we were to adjust property tax versus curbside collection fee, would you still not be supportive?
I would rather the increase of the $90 rather than the increase in the taxes, if that's what you're asking.
Sorry, say that one more time, because that confused me.
Are you asking, would I rather the decrease?
So if we do not, so say for in a scenario where we do not touch the increase to the curbside collection fee, but we look to decrease property tax, would you be supportive of that budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Farrell.
I also just wanted to note that with the exception of Councilmember Conti, who predates all of us here, none of us have voted on a budget that has had up to a 3% tax levy increase. And there's also a precedence of that I think it's also important for us as a council to look at that and take a stance and say, we understand that we're going to come under difficult fiscal times, but this is something that we care about, and we want to take the stance that we think it's important to go through and find places to save so that we are able to, as much as possible. It might happen in the future. We don't know what comes next, and there is a potential of some very dark times coming in the future, as Councilmember Keegan said. But at this stage, it seems really difficult to me to make that decision. So that's just another piece.
Thank you. Councilmember Conti.
Thought, I know when we had DGS here, we talked about the issue of recycling and the cost of disposing of recycling goods. And I believe, if I recall, Frank indicated that they were spending about $500,000 a year to dispose of mainly the plastic, the bottles, I suppose. I forget which one. There's the plastic, there's glass, there's tin, there's the paper ones, and it seemed like none of them really generated any income. Or maybe some of them might if they weren't commingled. I don't know. But I'm just wondering if there's something there, and it's not popular, but some cities, have looked at their recycling programs to reconsider what is required and not based on the cost. And I don't know, that's an issue out there.
Thank you. Councilmember Adams.
Just another question for clarification. So, again, for us newer council members, this is the first time we have to try to find money in this budget to cut this much. As we're looking at solutions on how to cut or where to cut, what is exactly on the table in terms of what we can cut from?
So, yeah, so,
Thank you.
thank you, Councilmember Adams, for your question. In terms of like our power to adjust the budget, it's really been geared towards expenses. Certain expenditures such as supplies, furniture, contracted services. That's historically where we have pulled in the past. Last year, I think we pulled a total of 180 or 90,000 for changes through that mechanism. That was not easy for that amount. And we looked through each department and made adjustments from there. We have in front of us, I did also ask our research council to do an interpretation. Our power is not we cannot go and cut salaried positions. There is a difference of interpretation in the law if that position is filled or not. The administration is very, I think clear-cut in that we can't cut positions, but there might be a little bit ambiguity in there. So I don't want to say that that's an option for us, but trying to assess because we're talking a larger dollar figure. The other option, which was a question of Councilmember Ballerin, that I'm looking for guidance from our budget director on is where's our fund balance? If it's healthy and plentiful, do we have any wiggle room in that to adjust given this larger dollar figure? I don't know that that's the case, but we will get those figures soon.
Thank you for the clarification. I'll read this real quick and.
Thank you. Councilmember Farrell.
And also just to note, for anybody that's listening at home, and I would say that probably both Richard and Robert can weigh in a bit more, but to understand that our style of government is a very mayor-centric government. So we do not even have to vote on this. I mean, this is something that it will be enacted regardless of what we do. We do have potential for amendments, but this is very much the mayor's budget, and the mayor dictates what is in the budget. We are fortunate that we are able to go through this budget process because it does bring a lot of light to what's in the budget and conversations about it, which I think benefits both the administration and us. It teaches us about what's in it, but it also, I think, helps the greater public understand what is in each budget area. But when it comes right down to it, for any of the listening public, we really have very little power when it comes to the budget. So it's an important thing to keep in mind. And I think a lot of our power is doing things in public like this. So it is a public conversation that our constituents appreciate, and also will kind of push things along to make our words have a lot more impact that we might not necessarily have in the city code.
Thank you. Councilmember Ballerin. Sure, Councilmember Conti.
Yeah, I mean, you do have some power within parameters, obviously, and those parameters might be very restrictive. You can do certain things. You can, for example, change the tax levy increase. But responsibly, then, you should also provide an offset to that. But you have the power to change the tax levy increase. You can, in terms of the local law regarding the trash fee, again, you can change, either not adopt that or change the level. But then responsibly, you need to have, yeah. So there are things like that. And there are programs and appropriations that you can delete within the budget.
Just as a clarification, a local law is completely different than the budget. This was more of something. I have constituents that listen to this, and then they'll say, why doesn't the council just do this? And I'm like, well, we don't actually have the power for that. So it was more of an articulation of that.
No, yeah.
The local laws, we have a lot of power over. So to keep that separate.
But that local law is directly related to the budget because that relates to the appropriation in the budget. So, yeah. So I'm just saying you're not completely powerless, but yeah, we are strong mayor, not weak council, but There are parameters. Okay. So I don't, just want to put that in a little more context.
Thank you. Councilmember Ballard and then Councilmember Flynn.
Thank you, and thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Councilman Conti. 'Cause we are limited. We are very limited in some things, but we don't have to vote for any bonds. We can say we're not going to vote for any bonds. We can say we're not going to vote for this trash fuel. So I mean, that's kind of going nuclear, but it's part of the shared government where, you know, we've got to work with each other, and we've got to figure things out together, because we're all in this together, and we're all living in this city trying to do the best we can together. So, you know, I don't think we need to go nuclear. I don't ever recommend doing that, because that just hurts everybody. But I do think we need to make sure that, you know, we are clearly addressing the concerns the residents are telling us their concerns. And their concerns is people feel they're being priced out of the city. And that's what I'm hoping is getting clear, that we got to find some way to get this, ease some of this burden that we're putting on our residents as best we can. And I know we have limited resources, but I think we need to use all of them that we do, and to try to work with the administration to find a way to get to a place where we feel more comfortable.
Thank you. Councilmember Flynn.
I just want to piggyback on what they all just said. You know, our job is to dissect the budget, do our best, work with the mayor, the administration. And again, I get a lot of people saying, how can you vote on this budget? Taxes, this, blah, blah, blah. And I say, our job, we'll do the best we can, that we can find situations and do our best for the residents. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, committee members, council members present, what I would like to do is just, because we have multiple scenarios happening here, I'm going to do some straw votes, if that's okay with the group. 3 votes. So first one's going to be no changes, property tax increase, and trash, curbside collection fee increase. The second is to reduce only the curbside collection fee. And the third is to reduce only property tax. Okay, so first, is there anyone in here that doesn't want to change either? 1, thank you. 2 is reduction to curbside collection fee. Thank you. And next, last one being reduction to property tax. Voted twice. I didn't do a 4th, reduce both. My apologies. Okay, so it does seem like with those present, what we will venture towards is the reduction to property tax. And what is probably more realistic, if I'm just being transparent with you all, is going from a 3% levy to a 2% levy, finding $630,000 of reduction within the budget. Okay? I will not ask you to painstakingly go through expenditures right now. I will first have conversation with our lovely budget director about potential reduction areas prior to going through that process, but there's potential that we go through that next week. Okay? All right. So looking at the rest of the agenda, if no further comments on that,
So it could include reductions, or it could include finding additional revenues,
yes.
correct?
Yes. Thank you. Reductions or any additional revenues. And hopefully, our budget director and I will find a more seamless solution to that. Okay. So looking at the rest of the agenda for this evening, before we go into the next ones, and this is not a dismissal of anything we're going to discuss, but I do just want to bring up what we discussed yesterday. It is very hard to say we are a council focusing on affordability, focusing on reductions to proposals, and then also simultaneously say that we want to do certain increases for certain things. So I just want us to be of, the same mind that there are some in here that are relatively small or just transitions of funds. But if we're talking large additions, I think it's disingenuous of us to try to reduce tax but also add to budget. So if anyone disagrees with that, please let me know. Okay. So the first walk-on item to discuss, there was and this was just picked up via comment during our fire department presentation, an interest to add a communications staff member to the fire department and or contracted services to the fire department to increase their communications. My understanding that council member is not here this evening, but it would be more so focused towards their social media presence, and acknowledgement that fire might have some additional elements that they can add to their social media. Councilmember Keegan.
I just want to note that neither the union nor the fire department actually asked for this position. And again, if we're looking at cuts, we should not be adding additional staff or additional contracted services for that.
Thank you. Other comments on this? Okay. I think the sentiment is here that we agree. I think the point was made to fire that there might be some areas for improvement on social media or different creative solutions that they can do to get more information out to constituency. I do believe that they can do that with the budget that they have. So can we take again, just a hand vote on this to see if anyone would like to pursue adding this to the budget? Yes, Councilmember Ballerin first.
I don't think we can afford to do this, I'll be honest with you, but I hate the fact that the member who wanted to speak on it isn't here to be able to at least speak his viewpoint. I don't know if we could table it and give him another opportunity. I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest with you, right now I don't think we could afford it. That's my opinion, but
I'm happy to bring it back. Sorry, not to cut you off. I'm happy to bring it back if said council member shows up. I did think that they were coming this evening. They aren't here. So if they come into a meeting on Monday or Thursday, we can quickly discuss with them present, if that's fair. Okay. Okay. Second one is related to our city clerk. A couple requests. Let's actually pull those here. And with our city clerk present, it might be helpful to have you walk us through some of this, but the first one that I'm seeing in this packet is related to the licensing system. Can you just talk us through the additional request here?
Yes, so the licensing system that you reference is our BAS clerk system. That's where we do our marriage licenses, domestic partnerships, dog licenses, and a few other additional permits out of the clerk's office. With this, last year, if you remember, you approved the additional usage for the animal control officers. We had approved 5. Out of that 5, we only used 3 additional licenses, but we still paid for a total of 5. So you'll see that we were given a credit for those 2 additional, meaning that they're not going to, the credit is going to be applied for 2026, but we are also looking at a 5% increase on top of what our invoice was for last year.
And so just to summarize again, thank you for that. The net increase that you're requesting is, what is that amount?
For the clerk licensing system, I'm not asking for any additional with this one for this year.
You're
Moving
not.
forward, I would request that the Albany Police Department reimburse the clerk for those licenses that they are using. That way the burden is not on the clerk's office to cover that cost.
Understood. And that is something that we can absolutely highlight in this year's budget intent memo
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
Any questions on this item? Okay. So moving forward,
Moving forward, you have the Granicus subscription services, that's for our FOIL system. We are looking at a 5% increase on that total amount as well, so that brings that total amount to over $9,000 for the year. And then I also provided 2 quotes for the front desk area in the clerk's office that has never been updated. And with the increase of services and constituents in the office, we need to be a little bit more functional on the front desk service counter area. So you have a quote in front of you from Davies Office Furniture for a total amount of $7,808.72. I'm asking for an additional $2,808.72. No, excuse me, my additional ask is $3,081.72. We have already budgeted $5,000.
and in one, so just going back to the Granicious subscription, there's no request for increase there? This is more informational?
The increase would, total increase would just be that additional 5% on top of that. Well, that is already included in the invoice that they provided us. So, let's see where we're at.
And that's going into your contracted services, I assume?
That is contracted services, yes.
So right now, the budget is 25,000.
For contracted services, yes.
Would that increase to Granicious, and other, other items that you have in that line item, is that 25,000 covering?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
That is
there's no-
covering all of our subscription services in the clerk's office.
And that 25 is sufficient?
Excuse me?
The 25,000 is sufficient?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Keegan.
But we need an additional 3K, right?
For the
For furniture.
furniture and fixtures. We have budgeted 5,000 right at the moment.
Councilmember Farrell.
I will say that historically, that budget line was,
0.
well, we had a furniture and supply line for the council for years that we would just never use, that was used at different points. And then I know that it was traditionally higher, we just never used it, which is fine. I have no issue with not using a budget line, that's fine. But just to the point that it is something that it's a small increase, and I do think it matters to have that. I mean, I appreciate the updates that have happened in the clerk's office, because were not many updates for a very, very long time. So I wouldn't have an issue with that.
I wouldn't not like to move any furniture money from the council line, only because our council staff, they don't have anything new, so they have pieces of furniture. The goal is to update their furniture in their office as well, with new desks and chairs moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not saying that. We didn't have staff for a long time.
Yes,
So
yes,
it
but
was
now that we
something
do-
that for many years was never utilized. I'm absolutely thrilled that, especially with our high-quality staff now, that they have furniture.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah, I was not insinuating that at all, but just rather it's something that I don't think either the clerk's office or the council has really utilized much over the years, so, which we can see now.
Yeah. And just following up on that, we do not, and I think this is what you were saying, we do not have a furnitures line anymore for common council?
Right.
So are you saying that the council's also looking, like our council staff's also looking?
Moving forward, I would like to, that's our next goal, is to update their desks and chairs, just to make it more functional in the office. So if we could put that back into the budget for '26, that will be definitely used to update their office furniture.
Okay. All right, so there's kind of two things on the table here. So the first is looking to find additional funding to increase our furniture and fixtures for the city clerk's office by $3,000, based on the quotes received, to update the front desk. Anyone opposed to that? The second that came up in conversation is that the Common Council does not have a furniture and fixtures line. Again, we're getting into the point where we got to cut, but then we're trying to add. However, I think there should be a line for that, and a small, even nominal amount of $3,000 to $5,000 might help, would help our council staff and our council members have better furniture.
I think, but the other piece too, I think what I was hearing from you is to ask for us to build that back in for fiscal year 2027, not so much fiscal year 2026, correct?
We would love for 2026, but if it's not possible, then yes, 2027, definitely.
Is anyone interested in trying to add council for 2026? Or, not 2026, we could put it in the budget intent memo that we would like to see it for 2027. Councilmember Ballerin.
I just think it needs to be noted for the record that this Common Council total budget has not changed from 2025 to 2026. I just want to make sure that's very clear. From our adopted total final budget was 1.144121 in 2025, and our proposed budget is 1.44121. So I think it needs to be stated. If there is any increase to that, it wouldn't be it would be because we have had no increase. We stayed flat. So just want to make that noted. Thank you.
Councilmember Keegan.
And then I just want to note, I know that we reinstated funds for training and conferences because we typically have new members that are coming in and we expense them to NICOM. And that's part of the purpose, but I think that is an area where we could pull small amounts without changing the overall budget. If we wanted to create a furniture and fixture line, we could put $1,200 in there. That would allow Shaniqua to at least order 4 new chairs. And would be able to accommodate the other thing that I was asking for in there without leaving us so underfunded as to not be able to send those 6 new members to NICOM.
Councilmember Farrell.
I would be comfortable with that. I am, to your point, Chair, of your statement in the beginning of additions when we're looking at reductions. I'm very sensitive to that. But moving some from that line, I think would make a lot of sense. Especially because the NICOM that we usually go to, it's local. It's not something that I think even comes, I think all of us could go to NICOM and we wouldn't even come close to the $10,000, so. I would definitely be comfortable with seeing if we could shift that a bit.
A bit over there. Okay. And so I heard 1,200. We'll just make that 1,005 for conversation. Our committee members comfortable with shifting training 1,500 to furniture and fixtures for the council. Yes. Okay, so that is a neutral change that we will pursue. Any other questions or comments on city clerk and or common council? Okay. All right. Our next item we have is the Commission on Disabilities. First and foremost, thank you, Councilmember Keegan, for all of your efforts to get this commission within our city. And now with it being established, obviously, there are some expenditures that will be involved as well. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so my apologies to everyone on the body. While I did have staff amend the actual legislation to demonstrate a fiscal impact to the city. Because the legislation didn't pass until after the budget was announced, I didn't feel comfortable requesting a line item for the commission be created and baked into the budget. And what I'm asking for is that we appropriate at least a minimal amount of funds to get them up and started, so that if staff or the clerk are in a position to have to provide for sign language interpreters or some form of adaptive equipment to facilitate participation in interviews and/or participation in the board, we're not in a position where we have to explain to people, well, we didn't actually allocate that in the budget, so we've got to go to estimate and apportionment and ask for funds to be transferred over before we can facilitate that. So what I was hoping for, at least for now, is for us to pull 1,000 out of, again, the training and conference line, to have a specific line item associated with the commission. And, you know, at least that would get us through the creation, the interview process and the creation of the board. And from there, we'll have a better understanding of what their sort of reasonable accommodation needs may be going forward. And we can kind of go back and figure that piece out. But I would really prefer to not start this out without thinking about those kinds of things. I think that that's a really poor way for us to start what is supposed to intended to be a very good and inclusive thing.
Thank you, Councilmember Keegan. So the request here is 1,000, again, neutral, pulling from training to a net new line item for the Commission on Disabilities under the Common Council. The net result of the two conversations we have would be that training and disabilities would become training and conferences would become 7,500. And then we would have a Commission on Disabilities for 1,000 and a increase to Common Council furniture for 1,500 as well. And is everyone supportive of that? Yes, yes, yes. Perfect. Councilmember Conti.
Would you be transferring that amount from the council budget then to the clerk's budget?
No, the
Yeah.
Commission on Disabilities is under the city council.
I thought it was under the city clerks, but maybe
No, it's under the Common Council.
Okay.
That's why I was looking,
Yeah, no.
it was a weird position to be in because it passed like 2 weeks after the budget was
That's fine, because I was
announced,
just going
but
to suggest if it was going to go, you would want to keep the amount in the council office rather than moving it over.
yeah, and
But,
I would hope that going forward, you know, they come in line with sort of the violence prevention task force line that we have in here, which is closer to 5K. But you know, in essence, because we've started so late, I'm not even going to ask for that much. That's what we predicted in the bill would be the fiscal impact to the city for this kind of stuff. And it could be more than that, if depending on what the accommodation needs are. My concern is just ensuring that staff have the ability to at least facilitate interviews without having to go through estimate and apportionment.
Okay. Sounds like we're all supportive of that, Councilmember Keegan, so that's something that we will include as part of our amendments. Thank you. So that does bring us to the end of the proposed agenda for this evening. I want to summarize what we discussed, and then I'm going to go through future dates. Does everyone have this, by the way, or was I the only one that got this budget plan? It looks good. So,
Can I just add one thing?
yes.
And I don't know that it's something that necessarily would make sense this year, but I would love to have it in the budget intent resolution to note that I do ultimately think it makes a lot of sense for the CPRB to have an in-house attorney. And it might be something that it could potentially be budget neutral, depending on how we look at, I think this upcoming year, it would be difficult to do that with the hiring and needing to extend the contracted services. But I do think longer term, it makes a lot of sense for them to have an in-house attorney as opposed to contracting for one. So I just wanted to, you had asked for budget things, and that's one that I wanted to flag.
Yes. And we did have a discussion, we did not have a discussion on that yesterday, but we did have a discussion generally on the CPRB in terms of their budget for this year and then their subsequent budget ask. And at least for those members that were here, we were comfortable with keeping the budget as is for this year. But definitely for budget intent memo, including language around the CPRB future, as well as the in-house attorney mention, I think we can absolutely draft that up. Councilmember Keegan.
I just wanted to say I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Farrell on that. I think while that attorney probably would not be the entity that is leading any litigation against the city, they would probably still need adequate contracted services to be able to continue the litigation that they currently have in the courts. I think it would be incredibly helpful for them to have in-house legal guidance that's salary as opposed to relying on contracted services for day-to-day operations of the board and legal questions that they may have that are not related to that litigation.
Thank you. Okay, so to summarize this evening's conversation, starting from the beginning, we discussed local law D, curbside collection fee. In that conversation, we had a fruitful conversation. We also discussed the property tax increase. The result of that is that we are not going to pursue a change to local law D, which the increase will remain. However, we will pursue a reduction to the property tax increase, bringing the levy down to 2% and finding approximately $630K of reductions and or additional revenue within the budget to offset. We also discussed the fire department communications, and we agreed that we will likely not pursue in this budget, but we will allow for, if the council member that was interested comes to a meeting next week, to speak on that behalf as well. We discussed the city clerk request, and we are going to pursue an additional $3K to furnitures and fixtures for the front desk redo. And then we also, as part of the city clerk, will include in the budget intent memo a mention of requesting that APD reimburses for the animal control licenses to the city clerk. We also discussed, as part of the curbside collection fee, we also discussed in the budget intent memo, including a section for incentives for waste reduction. Then we just discussed the Commission on Disabilities, in which we will do a transfer within the Common Council from training to a new commission line of $1,000 for expenditures. We also discussed for the Common Council moving $1,500 from training to furnitures and fixtures for the Common Council line. Anything I missed in summary? Oh, budget intent, just add on here, CPRB language, including in-house attorney language. So going forward, we have about a week and a couple days left of this process. So on Monday, November 10th, we have a long schedule. We will have presentations from the mayor's office for their budget, from the auditor's office, and from Corporation Counsel for their budget. We did just discuss property tax, so we might, depending on how far I can go with the budget director over the next couple days, that might be a conversation where we bring it back up. We are also going to discuss local law C, which is the increase to salaries, and then the request for Albany Housing Authority part-time security from Councilmember Ballerin. On that date as well, I am trying to make sure you all get by EOD in your inbox the budget intent memo draft. That way, on the 13th, we can discuss the budget intent memo draft, anything missing, and any unfinished business that we may have. Also on the 13th, we will go over an ordinance, non-related to the budget, 59-101-25, related to Mount Zion property. And then on the 17th, we will have our regular meeting, including our second public hearing, and then we will vote on this year's budget. Questions on the schedule? Councilmember Bellerin.
So it's not a question on the schedule, it's actually about local OD, so I'm not sure we can go back to that briefly before we leave,
Sure.
just because I had some thoughts. Thank you, sir.
You are good to go. I'm finished, so.
I'm okay to open, okay, so thank you, Chair. So I just wanted, one thing I'd like for us to discuss or have a conversation about it is possibly putting a cap on the trash fee of how much it can be increased for 1 year. Because my concern is that we're just going to, you know, there's a cap on how much you can increase taxes, but, you know, the actual cost of the trash curb collection is actually increases higher than the increase of the taxes. So it's actually costing people more. So, and I understand that's something that's gonna continue to go up because of the increased expenses. But I'd like to discuss maybe putting a cap on it of how much any 1 year it can go up. So we don't see a continuity of this going up 50%, 100%, and also it gives us as a city more incentive to, one, do it annually, which is not going to be pleasant, I know, but also, two, gives people some kind of clarity of what they can expect of increases when it comes to this specific fee. So it was just something I thought, I wanted to put it out there. Doesn't have to be discussed today, but I wanted to put it out there as something that I'd like to have conversation about.
Nope, that was none.
Yeah, on the one hand, because the fee is set in code, you do control from year to year. But then thinking it through, if you want to, you could put something in the code saying that, which does create a cap and saying that, no, there will be no increase in excess of whatever you want, which then would prevent the mayor in the future, I suppose, from proposing an increase in the budget which is in excess of the cap that you say can't happen. But then, of course, you can always change it. But the mayor would know in advance what the cap is, and that would be a disincentive. You could also put something in there that it would require a supermajority to amend the law to increase the fee above the cap. That's another way of dealing with it.
Councilmember Keegan.
I mean, I think that that is an absolutely fair compromise on this issue. I mean, it's not a matter of I love the fact that the trash fee is going up by $90. I think that if we had increased the trash fee by $20 every year going forward, this would not be happening in the way that it's happening this year, and people would be less upset. So I think if you were to approach it from, I think you need to allow for some wiggle room in whatever rate that you set that at, but I think both of your suggestions are fair, because it puts budget development in the position to say, this is the most we're going to be able to do, and we have to figure out, it's going to be very difficult for us to propose more than this, and we have to figure out how to make that work. However, it also incentivizes them to continually put that increase in every year, whether they really feel like they need it or not, because they're particularly when they're coming up on new labor contracts, for example. I mean, those are compounding factors, and they're looking at creating deficits in the millions. And so it, in some ways, also then incentive. But I honestly, I think that they're going to be looking to increase the fee again and again and again, moving through 2028 to 2030. Because by 2030, I think it's projected, isn't it 2030 is when they're projecting that the majority of landfills in the state of New York will be closing? Roughly around there?
Yeah, by 2030, the vast majority will be shut down.
Can I just go back to the statement real quick? This is Brian, Legislative Director, since I'm currently off camera. Just to go back, just to go back to the supermajority note, I want to point out in the Charter, Section 404, we are required to, all votes on local laws outside, all votes on anything outside of bond debt would need to be by majority vote. So we would need to amend the charter as well if we were to look at that.
Thank you, Brian.
Can I add one thing? You're probably correct, but I was also thinking, I don't believe the council right now gets either maybe annual reports on the actual cost of the curbside trash program, collection program. And is that something that you might want to add so you can compare what the costs are in comparison to the revenue generated, or maybe you don't want to know that anyway?
It's not fully baked into the budget, but it's under the sanitation section. So when you're looking at the collection fee, what's coming in versus what's going out, if you look at the actual budget for sanitation, it's offsetting the salary of the people that are doing that collection. I mean, yes, our sanitation workers do things in addition to collecting garbage. It's also our recycling crew, it's also our compost crew, and that crew goes out and collects our public garbage cans, those kinds of things. But it is somewhat separated out in the way that the budget is set up.
Yeah, I think the original curbside collection program was done back in way at the beginning. There was a provision in there because it was supposed to be an annual assessment, and at that point, the fee was a floating fee based on the actual costs, based on what was reported, and then the council was going to set the fee every year by resolution.
And yeah,
but that never really happened.
It doesn't actually account for our costs for the landfill itself.
And was not supposed to.
There's actually costs associated with curbside collection that are not covered by the garbage fee in the way the budget is currently structured. Because our landfill folks are totally separate from sanitation.
And they were supposed to be separate from the cost for curbside collection.
Okay. Councilmember Farrell.
I just wanted to say that I think it's a great idea, and I like it a lot. I do like the idea of a super majority, and I know if we can navigate the whole super majority thing, but saying that we can, I do like the idea of putting that in there just because since I deal with so much in my day job, I am a little henny penny about trash fees, obviously, and the potential escalation of it, and it might need to go up more than that, but I think with that supermajority clause in there, that allows for that, and I do like the idea of kind of holding that accountability so that it isn't doubled in the future, because I agree, it shouldn't have been doubled like this. It should be something, it's a continual conversation that we're having. One, because it actually brings awareness to people where the number one place to reduce is people reducing. So if there's an awareness that if you throw away less, it will cost us less in the longer term, I think that's a helpful thing. And I'd forgotten to mention that I do love Councilmember Conti's notes about waste reduction, and just 40% of our garbage that we throw away from households is food compost. So requesting something, we've talked about potentially having something for people that do food composting. I don't expect it would be something, it would be anything huge that would make a giant impact, but just a few people composting their food can actually make a significant difference when it comes to the amount of garbage that we're throwing away.
Thank you. Okay, so there's an interest on adding a cap to this. It sounds like we have at least majority of the committee interested in that. So the follow-up question to that, and going to the Councilmember Ballerin, the originating councilmember on this, what cap do we want to set? Councilmember Ballerin.
I think a 10% cap is a fair starting number. I mean, I think if we're looking at a fair, I mean, if we're saying you can only go up to 10%, that's saying you can go up to $18 increase, which is a high amount. I think that's giving the budget a lot of flexibility versus going like a 5 or 3%, giving them a lot. They don't have to go to that 10%, but you'd hope they would go below, you know, but I'm open to hearing other people's thoughts.
Thank you, Councilmember Ballerin. Just to start, I think 10% is too low. As much as I would love to see 10% or less, the reality of the situation in the outcoming years, I think 10% will be a struggle for our city. Just working back from, we're having a 100% increase this year. We talked about even a 50% increase being much more palatable towards constituency. If you want to follow my math here, if we go in between the middle of 50 and 10, roughly, my proposal here would be to put no more than 30% increase year over year, roughly. Councilmember Farrell.
I was going to say 25%, but I mean, I think that if we do 10%, that, depending on, I mean, we could have something where once all the landfills close in New York, our garbage costs, like all garbage costs, could literally quadruple. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, it's dramatic what they pay on the West Coast because they have to ship their garbage internationally. It's unbelievable. So I would caution against 10% because this is something that, and it wouldn't just be us, it would be everybody that has garbage. It would be a dramatic increase because once all the landfills close in New York, then we're trying to figure out where it goes. There's just a lot of different pieces to that. So if that was something that was like 50 years in the future and, you know, there's going to be flying cars and all sorts of things, that's one thing. But this isn't 50 years in the future. This is like 6 years in the future. So I would caution against 10%. I think that we would be setting ourselves up for failure, and we'd have to come up with a lot of supermajorities.
Councilmember Keegan.
I'm just going to note something for the body to consider, because when you do things in percentages, they compound. So, you know, 25% of $180 then compounds because it becomes 25% of $225 roughly dollars, and then it becomes it continually. So if you go with a percentage over a flat dollar amount cap, that percentage is going to compound every time the mayor meets the minimal percentage. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just saying it is something that you should consider.
Councilmember Conti.
So this is more of a fundamental question. If you're going to leave in statute what the fee is, so say it's $180 per unit, but also include something in there that it can be increased no more than X percent. In effect, you're putting a restriction, you might say, on council power. Does that, and that's just a legal question, does this get into an issue of a permissive referendum? Because you're doing a local law that's affecting the ability of a legislative or an elective official? You know, get what I'm saying? For example, when we did the CPRB in 2021, and we included that the annual budget has to include 1% of the police department's budget, That was a requirement, that requirement was subject, what triggered the referendum provision, because it placed a requirement on the mayor in terms of the budget that was being submitted. In this case, we're placing a restriction on the ability of the council to act legislatively on something which might trigger a referendum requirement under.
Happy to do some research and circulate thoughts to the committee, but, you know, first instinct is, yeah, it sounds like it might trigger a referendum.
Probably not. Councilmember Keegan and Councilmember Ballerin.
So I did the compounding math for folks so they understand what I'm talking about really quickly over the course of 4 years. So at a rate of 25% over the course of 4 years, if they raise it 25% over the course of 4 years, by compounding that rate, people would end up paying $439.45 per year for garbage if they raise it 25% every single year. If you did a flat fee of $45, which is half of what's being proposed right now, the increase would only bring you to $315 per year. So that's why I'm saying be cautious about a percentage cap, because it compounds. And you can end up with significantly higher costs than you would if you capped it at a dollar amount. It may provide greater flexibility as well for the city, but I would be cautious, because percentages typically compound pretty significantly over the course of time.
There's no perfect system, because dollar amounts also, you end up in a stuck situation. We deal with it at the state a lot, because people put in a dollar amount and then they put in a dollar amount in like the 80s and then nobody wants to change it. So I caution against dollar amounts too. So there's not a perfect system for either one of these. Like, it's something that it's a cap. It could be something that we say for the first 5 years, 25%, and then it goes down to 10%. I don't know. Putting in a dollar amount sets yourself up for failure as well, because it's something that you put in that dollar amount, you might need to exceed that dollar amount. Let's say that it's in 10 years. It's completely ridiculous, the dollar amount that we have, and it's hard to change it because it's very unpopular. So I really highly caution against a dollar amount.
Councilmember Ballerin.
So I guess the first question I want to know is from legal, can we put a cap? Because what you said so that kind of like negates the whole conversation. Can we put a cap on this, whether it's a dollar amount or a percentage?
Which he said I'll do some research.
Okay, so you're gonna do research. Okay, I'm open to either, to be honest with you. I think as long as we can find a way to make it so people know it's not gonna go too high. I like the idea of a percentage and that decreases. So instead of it compounding 25%, maybe we do 25% and then 20% and then 15%, and then we stay flat at 15 beyond there. So 3 year, no more than 25, no more than 15, no, what was it? No more than 25, no more than 20, and then no more than 15, because then that would keep it at a more, the compound won't affect it as much as the interest is going lower. So I'm open to that. I appreciate everyone being creative in trying to find a solution to this, so thank you.
One comment just to add, when we think of percentages, I think when we're talking, we're assuming now that every year they're going to take the maximum. Is there a route where that happens? Yes, but there's also a route where they don't increase, as they didn't for the last 6+ years. So I think, just putting that in conversation, because I think a scale might be even more difficult if we say 1 year you can do 25, the next 20, the next 15, the next. I think that if I saw that optically, that would just entice you to always hit the maximum. versus somewhere in the range.
And just a
My mic is
reminder,
not
we are voting on it there's a body that is voting on this every single time. So even if the percentages go up, if they're going up exponentially without any reasoning behind it, there is hopefully a body here that will vote against it. It's not as if it's something where it's currently without this idea that Councilmember Valorant had, there was no restriction. So it's not, I guess I'm less concerned about that because the check and balance is actually that cap being put in and the body voting on whatever that number is.
Yeah. But one thing is, once the mayor puts it in the budget that's submitted to you, you have to buy it back, even if it,
I mean, we don't actually, though. I mean, realistically, it's the responsible thing to do it, but if it's a ridiculous thing that council decides not to do, we don't actually have to. I mean, that's something that hopefully we'll always be responsible and try to buy those numbers back, but I would personally, if we had a mayor's budget where there was something that was utterly ridiculous in it, as a council, I would say, listen, this is, if we couldn't cut the parts that we felt were egregious because our hands were tied by statute, then that could be a choice that council could make, so.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock, recognizing that on this local law, we have to first determine if we can put a cap. I say we put a pin in this conversation for further conversation either the 10th or the 13th. And hopefully by then we have our research completed and we understand what we can do, and then we determine exactly the language and the amount that we will put. Before we conclude this evening, anything I'm missing? Okay. With that, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn by Councilmember Farrell. Is there a second? Second from Councilmember Keegan. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.